50,000 soldiers vanished without a trace. No battlefield was ever found, no weapons, no armor, no graves. Only one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. But the most terrifying part was not the disappearance itself. It was the fact that one of the most powerful armies on Earth seemed to be erased from existence within hours. So what really happened in the heart of the Sahara? And how can 50,000 men simply disappear? This is the story of the legendary Lost Army of Cambyses II.
50.000 Soldaten verschwanden spurlos. Es wurde nie ein Schlachtfeld gefunden. Keine Waffen, keine Rüstungen, keine Gräber. Nur eines der größten Rätsel der antiken Geschichte. Doch das Erschreckendste war nicht ihr Verschwinden. Es war die Tatsache, dass eines der mächtigsten Heere der Welt innerhalb weniger Stunden ausgelöscht worden zu sein scheint. Was geschah also wirklich im Herzen der Sahara? Und wie können 50.000 Männer einfach verschwinden? Dies ist die Geschichte der legendären verlorenen Armee von Cambyses II.
The horizon vanishes first, swallowed by a wall of churning ochre that screams with the fury of 1,000 dying gods. Imagine 50,000 men, the pride of the Persian Empire, reduced to shadows dancing against a hellscape of encroaching grit. There is no escape, only the suffocating embrace of the Sahara, a furnace of pulverized stone and glass that devours everything it touches. The sound is absolute, a relentless, deafening roar of wind and sand that shreds armor, fills lungs, and erases footprints before the man making them has even collapsed. One moment, a disciplined legion stands in the heat of Egypt. The next, there is only the undulating silence of the dunes. No armor remains. No blades are pulled from the belly of the earth. No bones bleach under the sun. They simply cease to exist, erased from the timeline like a whisper in a hurricane. This is the story of King Cambyses II and the Phantom Legion of the Desert. The year is 524 before Common Era. The Persian Empire, under the iron-willed King Cambyses II, has just conquered Egypt. But conquest is rarely enough for a king whose ambition borders on the divine. Driven by a volatile mix of hubris and strategic necessity, Cambyses turns his gaze toward the Siwa oasis. Nested deep within the western desert, Siwa is home to the Temple of Amun, a site of immense spiritual power where the Oracle resides. Cambyses is not merely seeking land, he is seeking validation, a divine decree to legitimize his rule over the pharaohs. He commands his generals to assemble 50,000 men, a force sufficient to crush any rebellion and command the respect of the gods themselves. The logistical nightmare begins the moment they depart from Thebes. To reach Siwa, the army must traverse hundreds of miles of hyper-arid terrain, a region where water is a myth and the terrain shifts with the whim of the wind. An army requires supplies, especially water, yet Cambyses pushes them forward with a reckless disregard for the limits of human endurance. Historians like Herodotus would later recount that the king was blinded by his own legend, convinced that the desert itself would bow to his imperial command. For 7 days, the soldiers march, their heavy leather and bronze armor acting as a kiln beneath the relentless Egyptian sun. On the 7th day, the nightmare arrives. It does not appear as a conventional enemy, but as a meteorological anomaly of biblical proportions. A sandstorm of unprecedented intensity descended upon the column. Historical accounts describe it as a wind rising from the south, powerful enough to turn day into a suffocating, impenetrable darkness. In the chaotic, blinding swirl, the army loses its cohesion. Centurions become separated from their units. The supply lines snap, and the sense of direction, the only thing keeping them alive in the vast expanse, is obliterated. The tragedy is instantaneous in its finality. Thousands die not from battle, but from sensory deprivation and dehydration within hours. They are buried where they stand. The wind covers their corpses in a shroud of sand, shifting the landscape so violently that when the storm eventually subsides, the terrain is reshaped into a completely unrecognizable geometry. The 50,000 are gone. Not even a stray arrow tip or a leather sandal strap has ever been recovered by modern expeditions. This is not just a military disaster, it is an archaeological puzzle that has frustrated scholars for centuries. Where did they go? Did they perish in the Great Sand Sea? Or were they victims of the shifting, treacherous dunes that characterize the Qattara Depression? Centuries later, the mystery remains as impenetrable as the storm itself. Modern archaeologists have scoured the region using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar. They have mapped the ancient caravan routes, analyzed climate data from the 6th century before Common Era, and even attempted to recreate the journey with modern survival equipment. Yet, the Earth remains silent. Some suggest that Cambyses, realizing the danger, might have attempted to turn back, only to be overtaken by the elements. Others argue that the entire tale was a fabrication, a piece of political propaganda designed to smear the reputation of a king who had effectively conquered the cradle of civilization. We can see this interreal more. Could such a massive force truly vanish? To understand the scale of the loss, one must consider the weight of their equipment. 50,000 men carry thousands of tons of metal and leather. Statistically, even if the army was buried, there should be remnants. An ossuary of bronze, a field of rusted headers, something to prove they existed. Yet, the zero-evidence reality of the Lost Legion has led to a controversial theory. Perhaps the geography of the desert shifted more than we comprehend. The Sahara is a dynamic, living entity. It does not merely sit, it breathes. Sand dunes move, subterranean aquifers shift, and the very ground that was passable in 524 before Common Era might have become a trap or a sinkhole in the years that followed. Consider the hubris of the endeavor. Cambyses was a man who challenged the elements, and in the history of human conflict, the elements have rarely proven forgiving. If we look at the psychological state of the soldiers, we see a trajectory of inevitable breakdown. By the 3rd day of the march, the water would have run low. By the 5th, the hallucinations would have begun. The heat, combined with the lack of hydration, creates a state of delirium. In such a state, an army does not march, it stumbles. Panic is contagious, and in the middle of a desert, panic is a death sentence. High-contrast visualization of the sun reflecting off the dunes, creating a shimmering, distorted heat haze. Now faint and rhythmic, like a pulse fading to a flat line. When the storm hit, it was the final act in a play that had been doomed from the opening scene. We must ask ourselves if this was an act of God or an act of negligence. Was it pure meteorological bad luck? Or was it the consequence of a king who viewed his soldiers as mere assets to be liquidated in the pursuit of his own vanity? There is a cold, clinical precision to the disappearance. It is as if the desert swallowed them whole, digesting their essence and leaving the surface as pristine as if no human had ever walked there. Travelers and desert nomads have long claimed to hear the phantom sounds of an army on the wind. They speak of whispers in the dunes on nights when the air is perfectly still, a lingering echo of a march that never ended. While we dismiss these as the projections of the mind, the sheer lack of physical evidence forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The desert is not just a place of isolation, it is a vault. It keeps its secrets with an efficiency that defies modern technology. Now, searching for the lost army is akin to searching for the wind itself. Every time we think we have found a clue, it is revealed to be a natural formation, a trick of the light, or a geological coincidence. The search, while noble, seems almost futile. The desert is under no obligation to yield its trophies. It remains a silent witness to a tragedy that has become a legend, a testament to the fact that no matter how mighty an empire appears, it is ultimately subject to the indifference of the natural world. 50,000 lives, 50,000 stories, and 50,000 dreams of conquest, all reduced to a quiet, golden grain of sand. As we look across these dunes today, there is a profound sense of unease. We walk on ground that once held the weight of an imperial ambition, yet we leave no mark behind. The wind continues to scour the surface, shifting the ancient dust, perhaps even now exposing a piece of leather or a discarded spear tip, only to bury it again a moment later. It is a cycle of revelation and concealment that has lasted 2.5 millennia. We are mere observers of a story that is no longer ours to tell. A ghost story written in the language of geology and silence. The Sahara does not remember the names of the dead, for it has no memory other than the movement of the wind. The silence of the Sahara is not empty, it is heavy. It presses down on the soul with the weight of all the things that have been lost to its depths. There is no closure to be found in the shifting sand, only the realization that some mysteries are meant to remain untouched. Behind the masks of our modern understanding, we are just as vulnerable to the wild, indifferent forces of our world as those men were in 524 before Common Era. The desert remains, the army remains lost, and the wind continues to blow across the graves that no map will ever mark. If this deep dive into history stoked your curiosity, subscribe to Fact Harbor for more investigations into the world's most enduring mysteries. The truth is out there, buried beneath layers of time and sand, waiting for those brave enough to look closer.